Easily the most common question I get asked when teaching people how to tune is, how do I create a bass map? This is the thing that puts off a lot of novice tuners and even experienced ones as well, thinking that if they don't have a perfectly configured bass map, they're going to instantly destroy their engine. Well, Haltech have addressed this with their new Haltech Connect App, and we're here with Mitch from Haltech to talk about how exactly this works. So, first of all, this is at the moment based around the relatively new Haltech Rebel LS ECU, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
For a little context, what is that ECU and how does it work?
So Haltech identified that there's a bit of a hole in the market when it comes to very easy to configure, simple plug and play ECU and harness applications, specifically for guys that are doing engine conversions. So the LS being one of the most popular conversion engines out there, we've come up with an ECU and a harness solution that really simplifies the process of getting the engine up and running and to a state where you can drive it.
So that addresses the other common concern I have from people is how do I wire it up? So this is literally plug and play with, obviously you still need to connect power and earth, you're going to have to connect up a fuel pump and some thermofans, but literally plug and play to the engine itself.
Yeah, correct. So it's a modular style harness, so we use the same core loom for both Gen 3 and Gen 4 LSs, and then we have breakouts from that. So depending on what style of injector loom you need, what style of ignition coil loom you need, what style of throttle body you're using, whether it's cable or Driveable wire, the core harness is the same, and then you just choose what sub-harnesses you want to use for your specific engine.
Couldn't be simpler. Okay. Now let's talk about how we actually get the thing up and running, because again, as you've just mentioned, there's a variety of different injectors, drive-by-wire versus cable throttle bodies. The LS engine as a base is great, but then there's different trigger systems, there's different capacities, camshafts, the works. How are you addressing that to really break this down and make it simple?
For sure. So you mentioned the Haltech Connect App. So the first time you power your Nexus ECU on, it creates a Wi-Fi network that you connect to that Wi-Fi network through the phone app. The app detects that it's a freshly powered on unit that hasn't had any configuration done, and it boots you straight into a configuration wizard. Let's
step back one step. Why a phone app versus using a laptop, which as a conventional tuner, that's my go-to, that's what I'm used to?
Look, for the guy that likes to tinker in his garage and likes getting his hands dirty, he might not have access to a laptop. He may not maybe be skilled enough to know how to download software, plug in, load a bass map. So basically everyone has a smartphone these days, whether it's an Apple or an Android. So yeah,
everyone knows how to download an app.
Exactly, yeah, very simple to find. Just download, install it and connect.
All right, so we've connected to our freshly installed ECU. It's already told us, hey, this is our first connection. We've got no map available. What's the sort of workflow from here for this enthusiast who's done this engine swap?
Yeah, so the workflow is pretty simple. It's just a step-by-step. So you fill out the fields that are on the screen, and then you just go through the prompts. I can show you on here.
Yeah, well, let's actually work through this while we're talking. So, yeah, show us.
So first up, it's going to ask you for a vehicle name. So in our case, we'll call it my car. You can pop a description in there if you want to. Next up, it's going to ask you for the engine type that you want. So this is our Rebel LS, so it's only showing us our LS-based engines. Now, if you're not sure what all these different variants are, you can just use the search box. So I know that I've got an LS1, and it's going to give us our LS1 specific options. So I'll choose LS1, pre-fills our engine capacity and our comp ratio. If you specifically know that maybe your engine's a low comp for turbo, or maybe it's just factory, we can just use a factory comp ratio and go next.
So alternatively though, if you know that the engine is a built engine and maybe it's no longer 10.5 to 1, maybe it's 11.5 to 1, you can simply then change that.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason why we ask for the compression ratio is actually used in an algorithm to determine the correct ignition timing to run for the engine as well. Next question is camshaft. So if you know the rough camshaft specs, you can choose one of these. So we'll just do a stock car. Next. Our aspiration, so this sets up, again, related to that estimated compression pressure. So we'll just choose naturally aspirated. Okay, which throttle body do we have? So because we chose LS1 at the start, it actually only shows us things that are related that we know exist on that LS1.
Sure.
So if you were to choose maybe one of the truck engines that never came out with a cable throttle, you'll only get the option for that. So we're really trying to reduce the amount of options that the user has to pick through.
Simplifying it down.
Exactly. However, if you've retrofitted a different throttle, maybe you've got an LS3 that only ever came drive-by-wire and you've converted it back to cable because it's in your old F-truck or whatever, you can just clear the pre-filled search and choose whatever throttle body you want. So in this case, we'll go drive-by-wire, map sensor. So again, pre-selected the LS1 Gen 3. I can clear that and we can choose any of the either aftermarket or OEM map sensors that we've got. So maybe we've got a Haltech 3-bar, so we'll choose that one.
But you could input a custom setting if you required.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, that's not a problem to do as well. So you would do that after the wizard's completed. Fuel system information. So this is if you have an onboard fuel pressure sensor that you maybe have added. Again, it's all set up for a stock LS style fuel system, which is all constant pressure. And then the next option here is fuel injectors. So again, pre-filled with LS1 fuel injectors. We've got the GM part number, so you can go and have a look on the side of your fuel injector. It'll have the GM part number. So we've got 30 pound an hour LS1 injectors. And then the last one is your ignition coil. So I'm going to say that I've retrofitted a late truck coil because they have a little bit more ignition energy. And then complete. So that's our first 7 steps of the config done.
So that's everything initially that the ECU needs to basically build up a base map that's suited to every part of your ignition, fuel system, drive-by-wire throttle, and the sensors.
That's exactly correct.
Doesn't get simpler than that.
Does not get any simpler than that. We've even gone a step further with that. Once those first 7 steps are done, we now go through what we call a checklist process. So this is another 5 steps that we go through. It's basically the ECU just making sure that everything is ready to go so we can actually synchronize and then fire the engine. So you'll see we're in a demo mode, so all of the data here isn't live, but you'll get a live data of all of the main engine sensors that we need to get the thing fired up, and then a quick test result. So maybe if you've not pinned your map sensor correctly, or maybe you've got a couple of things back to front, the software in the app is going to tell you, hey, this sensor hasn't specifically passed its test, so you may want to just go and check that. Once you get all of the results passed, you can go next. Because we chose drive-by-wire, we're doing a throttle and a pedal cal. That's just the same as if you were doing it through the NSP software.
So again, just follow the prompts?
Just follow the prompts, yep, let it do its thing. Next one is a fuel pump test. So this will actually test that you're able to get fuel pressure to the rails, and also that the base fuel pressure is in the ballpark of where it's meant to be. Thermofan, pretty important to make sure that's working, so it lets us do a quick test. The ECU obviously measures the current draw from the thermofan output, so not only does it make sure it's working, it makes sure that there's a load on that output.
So it knows that it's physically working rather than just blindly setting that output to be live.
Yep, that's exactly right. Does the same thing for the fuel pump as well. And then we have a really, really cool feature which a lot of guys have been really stoked with. It asks you to do a quick cranking test. As part of that cranking test, we make sure that we can synchronize with the engine. Now, as you know, different variants of LS engines have different trigger types, whether it's got the 60-2 or the 24X reluctor on the crank, and then also different camshaft pickups as well. So
you can get yourself in a lot of trouble there if you've mixed and matched camshafts, etc., and maybe now the trigger system is not how it should be, correct?
Yep, that's exactly right. So during that quick crank test, the ECU watches and reads the patterns from both the crank and the cam, and no matter what combination you've got, maybe you didn't realize that the camshaft that you put in had a LS1 half moon on the front, and you've put it into your LS2 that's got a 60-2, the ECU doesn't care. It looks at those 2 patterns, works out where everything is, and it'll synchronize up, no problems at all.
That's really a really great feature, because I think that's one of the areas that, particularly for those relatively new to tuning, understanding the trigger patterns, and then more importantly, entering that data correctly into the ECU, that's a real stumbling block, and these are literally the 2 most critical inputs to the ECU. If we don't have this right, the ECU's got no chance.
Yep, that's exactly right. As part of that cranking test, we also do some tests on things that are operating while the engine's cranking. So the ECU listens to the NOx sensors, make sure we get a bit of noise coming from those. It monitors the map sensor, make sure that we see a bit of vacuum being pulled under cranking, even measures the current draw on the injector outputs to make sure you haven't missed an injector plug. Once all that's done, you can press complete, and we boot straight into the ECU, and you're basically ready to go.
Okay, so this has created a base map. Now, my next question, of course, is this designed just simply to get the engine to a situation where it'll start, it'll run, and we can limp it to the dyno, or is this good to go to drive?
The idea is that it's good to go and to drive. So based on the compression ratio number that we gave it and the camshaft profile that you've given it, it'll create a volumetric efficiency table based on those, and then also we use a compression pressure estimation for our ignition timing. Along with that, you've got the O2 sensor is in closed loop O2 control with learning immediately, and the NOx sensors are also set up for per cylinder window detection with long-term per cylinder as well.
So in layman's terms, it's making corrections to any fueling that's not right. If the ignition timing is a bit too aggressive and it's creating knock, it's correcting for that, and it's then learning from this so it's not going to happen again. Have you just put me out of a job?
I hope not.
I mean, the reality, of course, is if you're looking at more extreme combinations, there's always still going to be benefit in actually hitting the dyno and getting everything dialed in just right, correct?
For sure. Look, if this was a methanol turbo drag engine, I probably wouldn't be sending it straight away. I think it'd be a good idea to get that on the dyno. But like I said before, for the guy that's put one in his F truck in his garage, you know, it's a stock LS that he's pulled out of a truck. It's absolutely perfect for that.
So common sense still applies. Look, as an amazing product, I think this is going to change the game for those who are maybe a little bit nervous about performing that engine swap. Just the simpler you can make it, the better. If people want to find out more about this or perhaps purchase a product, where are they best to do so?
Best place on the Haltech website, haltech.com. If you've got any questions, they can contact us through any of our social media channels, email, tech support.
Perfect. Thanks for your time, Mitch.
Too easy. Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.